Alright, so Cyrene has been out for a few days now, and upon her release, there was a lot of skepticism about whether or not she's actually going to be worth pulling. And I have already made a video discussing what I think her pull value is, but today we're going to go ahead and dive straight into the numbers to fully understand exactly how Cyrene works with the Chrysos Heir damage dealing characters, along with key units that are very good supports that Cyrene actually buffs and makes better. So each individual Chrysos Heir has their own individual buff, and we already have their prior damage calculations. So we're going to be going over both individual aspects, but we also have to look at another thing that Cyrene actually provides for the entirety of the team, that being her talent. You see, after reaching the maximum recollection points, you can overflow to 27. That is very cool because that allows you to have additional recollection points, so you can have a little bit more in order to gain your next ultimate activation. But the major aspect in her talent, apart from her recollection point collection, is the fact that Cyrene actually provides a damage dealt increase to all allies by 20%. That in itself is massive, because every calculation that we have, we can just do a flat 20% increase to every single one of those, regardless of the buff each individual Chrysos Heir gets. But into the whole meat and potatoes of the video, we're going to go over each individual Chrysos Heir to fully see what they are capable of providing in terms of raw damage numbers. So starting with Phynon, and I want to keep this in mind for every character that we're going to look at, we're simply just looking at their single target damage capabilities. Now obviously these numbers can be massively higher with multiple enemies on the field, but for the sake of the video, we're just going to be looking at their single target damage capabilities. So starting right here at E0S1, Phynon is going to be doing roughly 1.5 million damage to a single target. Now, all of these characters, Phynon included, is where they have their absolute maximum capabilities all activated. And keep in mind, we have a 20% damage boost just flat out with Cyrene on the field for Phynon. Now, the biggest thing for Phynon that Cyrene provides is the fact that she's going to be providing a 12% damage increase up to 72% depending on the amount of core flames exceeded of the total amount you're able to have, to providing a 16% crit rate increase. And the biggest thing is that Phynon is going to be able to maintain his Castellana state for a whole additional cycle. Instead of just the normal actions that you will be doing, this is going to be essentially doubled. So at a very baseline factor, we can look at that 1.5 million and just simply double that damage, because of the fact that Cyrene is going to be allowing you to have that entire cycle again. So very, very monstrous. Essentially, you're looking at a 3 million damage capability at E0. So very, very, very good for Phynon. This is going to be mainly focusing on his overall skill damage capabilities, because that's where his actual complete damage comes from. So we're looking at 927,000 damage. Very, very, very strong. Keep in mind, with Cyrene, again, 20% damage increase. So we're looking at a 20% damage buff for E0 Anaxa. But the other aspect that Cyrene provides is that you would also be gaining 1 skill point back, which is phenomenal just in and of itself. Then the skill damage instance, where normally you are just going to be having an additional one if you have another erudition character, if you take that out, Cyrene is going to be allowing Anaxa to do 3 additional instances of a skill damage. So you're looking at, let's just say 900,000 just for round numbers. You're looking at that buff all the way to 2.7 million, again with everything just flatlined, where all the buffs are equal, which is incredible. And on top of that is that he is going to be gaining True Knowledge, which is going to be increasing the attack of all erudition characters by 60% and further increasing the skill damage by 40%. So essentially you're looking at like a 100% buff for 4 instances of a skill damage. Massively insane and stupid with the possibilities that Cyrene provides for Anoxa. So already that's like a huge, massive jump in comparison to Finon. Moving over to Castris. She at E0 with her light cone is going to be looking at about 870,000 damage to a single enemy. This is taking into account her true damage and all of that great stuff. With Cyrene, you're going to be able to further increase your overflow up to 200%. And since we are looking at a single enemy, we have to take into account 24%. So you multiply that 0.24% by an additional 100. That's an additional 24% overall damage that Netherwing is going to be providing, which is fantastic. You can just multiply what we have right here by the 20%, and then you do that again by the 0.24% or 24% if you're able to fully get that additional 100% of the new bud overflow to further boost Castris' damage. Now we have Evernight doing a 1.6 million damage. Again, some of these characters just damage just by themselves is ridiculous. Now we further add the 20% buff with Cyrene that just massively increased. But with her unique ability for Evernight, the Dream Dissolving as Dew Memo Sprite skill damage is going to be further increased by 18%. So again, a huge, massive damage bonus right there, while additionally getting 1 memorial point, which is very good, whether you use a skill or ultimate. But the crit damage boost effect by that skill is going to be further increased by 12% of Evernight's crit damage. So again, an additional amount of damage being provided. I would have to say this is right behind Anoxa in terms of overall damage capability further boost. Now we are over to Aglaya, and a measly 568,000 damage. You got to keep in mind in terms of power scaling and just power creep, she was one of the first Chrysos heirs to be released, so it kind of makes sense that her damage is lower than everybody else. But the buff that Cyrene is going to provide for Aglaya and for the Garment Maker is that the boost effect for the Garment Maker's Memo Sprite talent is going to be maxed out all the way, which actually boosts Aglaya's overall damage with Garment Maker, while also increasing the damage dealt by Aglaya and the Garment Maker by 72% damage. And the biggest thing here is that you're going to be ignoring 36% of the enemy target's defense, which is incredible. That's actually probably one of the biggest buffs that she's going to be getting, not the 72% additional damage that she's going to be allowing to do with the buff of the Ode to Romance, but the fact that she's going to be ignoring 36% of the enemy's defense, Aglaya and Garment Maker. So while you do your absolute complete ultimate damage, that's even further damage buff that you're going to be doing. I don't think people really truly understand just how great Cyrene actually is, and they also want to just lambast and just put her down because of the fact of how it was delivered in the story and the fact that she is just strictly a Chrysos heir buff character. But the fact is, she does so much for individual Chrysos heir units, and honestly, she is a must summon.